Hey guys, my name is Nick, and in this video I will be going over all the Shadowpriest talents and give you information needed to make sure that you pick the correct ones for the right occasion, so let's get started. So in the first tier of talents we have Twist of Faith, Fortress of the Mind and Shadow Word Void. In this tier you almost always want to pick Twist of Faith, however for fights that are completely single target, Fortress of the Mind can be slightly better. This is due to Twist of Faith only being available as a proc when the boss reaches 35% health, instead of proccing off adds earlier into the fight. Fortress of the Mind will enable you to stay in void form longer than Twist of Faith, which is why it's a viable pick on fights with only one target. But there are barely any fights out there like that, so the standard pick would be Twist of Faith. Unfortunately, Shadow Word Void is not really a viable pick in any scenario, it's a DPS loss no matter what. For the second tier of talents we have Mania, Body and Soul and Masochism. Here is the one and only pick you should go with Body and Soul. The reason is because it provides more mobility, which Shadowpriest really lacks, and Mania is just a shittier version of the talents, and Masochism just increase your healing. In the third talent tier row we have Mind Bomb, Psychic Voice and Dominant Mind. This tier really is useless for DPS purposes. Now I would recommend to pick Mind Bomb, however as it is an AoE stun, it could be useful while doing dungeons to reduce the damage your tank is taking. Otherwise, Dominant Mind could increase your DPS by a minimal amount by mind controlling a mob that you use as your pet, but there's just such a rare occasion that you won't really find yourself using it. It also scales horribly as the pet will hit like 10k, which is really bad. Now for a tier that's a bit more interesting, the fourth tier. Here we have Void Lord, Reaper of Souls and Void Ray. Now all of these three talents does have their uses, which is actually really rare, so let's start off with Void Lord. Void Lord will enable you to keep your haste stacks from your last void form into your second void form for 8 seconds. This does enable you to get a haste buffed Void Torrent off and the start of the Void form, which is going to do a bunch of damage. I would recommend to use this talent if you want to be able to do high damage on demand on different targets. For example, you're hitting the boss and then you need to swap to another target. The second choice is my personal favorite and arguably the best of them all, Reaper of Souls. Now this allows you to use Shadow Word Death on 35% HP targets instead of 20%. This really works well with Twist of Faith as a combo, as it increases the damage of your Shadow Word Death with 20% as well. I say that because they do proc at the same time, so you do get the buff from Twist of Faith damage. You want to be using this talent as soon as there are multiple adds during a fight, as even if the boss isn't at 35% health, you can use Shadow Word Death on the adds to stay longer in void form and get extra damage out. So for the last choice we have Void Ray, which is most likely the worst of them all, but it could be a decent talent if you're only hitting one target at a time, and then sometimes in the fight there will be heavy AoE that you can actually make use of your buffed Mind Seer in. Overall though, for this talent tier I would most likely go with the Reaper of Souls as a standard pick. Over to talent tier 5, which has the talent picks weirdly named Sun Lane, Auspicious Spirits and Shadowy Insight. As it currently stands, the only viable pick here is unfortunately Auspicious Spirits. It provides more insanity than both of the other picks and scales extremely well with multiple targets, just as a lot of the other talent picks you want to be choosing does. However, there is actually one exception to this tier. If you actually have the legendary belt, which is the best in slot 1, called Mangaza's Madness, which provides 2 additional stacks of Mind Blast, you should indeed go with Shadowy Insight instead. The reason to this is because without it, it can proc and overlap your Mind Blast cooldown, so like, it procs exactly when it goes off cooldown, and then it's only going to make it an instacast, nothing else. But with the belt, the proc will actually give you 1 additional Mind Blast in addition to making it instacast, which is good. Good enough to actually make it stronger than Auspicious Spirits, which is really hard to do. Ooh, alright, we're getting closer to the end. Try to stick with me for the last 2 tiers now, and even though there's a lot of information here, try to stay awake and reward yourself with something afterwards. In the tier 6 talent tree we have Power Infusion, Shadow Crash and the Mind Bender. The standard pick here is Mindbender due to the fact that Shadow Fiend grants you a great amount of insanity gain to stay in void form for a longer period of time, and having it on a 1 minute cooldown rather than 3 is obviously great. You can pick Shadow Crash in fights with a lot of adds stacked in a pile that needs to be bursted down quickly. It does a ton of damage, but due to its rather long cooldown of 30 seconds, it's extremely useless compared to Mindbender on fights with not that many adds. The last possible talent pick is Power Infusion. This one is quite interesting. It's actually quite a strong DPS cooldown, which is great for fights that require high burst damage at times and not consistent damage. Using Power Infusion for dungeons with boss fights lasting about a minute is actually the best pick. Alright, so we made it to the final talent here, which is Legacy of the Void, Mind Spike and Surrender to Madness. So I already actually made a video on how to use Surrender to Madness. I will link that in the description of this video for those of you who want to see how to do that. However, for this tier, both Surrender to Madness and Legacy of the Void are two really strong talents with Mind Spike lacking a bit. Surrender to Madness, as I stated in my previous video, is an extremely strong DPS cooldown, and with the correct use in raids is always going to be the best choice, unless the boss hides away for longer periods of time with nothing to hit in between, because then you'll just die as you can't keep your insanity up. But Legacy of the Void is a really good pick for consistent damage in short fights and short encounters, such as doing dungeons, where you need to kill trash mobs and boss fights are only about 1 minute long. Legacy of the Void is always passively active as well, compared to Surrender to Madness, which has a 10-minute cooldown, which makes Legacy even better for dungeon, as you can't use Surrender to Madness for every single boss encounter. So at last, Mind Spike has such a specific use that it's theoretically useless. Its only viable use is when a bunch of ads spawn and you need on-demand high cleave damage. Overall though, picking any other of the two would probably make you perform overall better in any fight anyways. Alright, that's all the talents covered. I hope it supplied you with the information needed, and if you did enjoy this video then please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more of me, which is maybe not that bad after all. And for now, see ya!